What's up, my fellow devs who don't know what a linked list is? It's your boy Michael, and in this video I want to share with you an idea I came up with. One of my favorite Christian rappers named Caleb Gordon. If you haven't checked him out, I recommend a song called War by him. Very fire. Let me know in the comments what you think about it. He did a thing back in the day where he dropped a song a week, every single week, and then he just blew up, right? Like, all his songs were everywhere, very famous, very successful, and I love that for him. He's a brother in Christ. But one thing I wanted to do is I want to do the same thing but for projects. So I'm going to be dropping a project a week for, let's see how long I can go. The first project I want to share with you is GuruCatcher. Now, I did a tweet on my Twitter, and a lot of people are sort of resonating with it. They're also laughing. And the tweet was basically saying, like, there's a lot of gurus out there who make outrageous claims saying they make $100,000 every 3 seconds and they can teach you how to do the same thing, but you have to buy a $497 course. And my premise is, if you're going to make that kind of claim, prove it. And that's what I built, a site that allows a guru to prove his or her claims. All you have to do to use the site is go to guru.rosmike.xyz, and you just have to paste your Stripe API key. Now, if you haven't made one, there's a hyperlink right here. You click it, and it will direct you to the Stripe dashboard, and it will pre-select the permissions you need. All of the permissions that are selected are read-only. There is no write. So, safety precaution. You click create key, and then you copy paste that key, but I already have a key made. So I'm going to paste the key here, and I'm going to click verify income. And then what happens is a dashboard pops up that shows my income from Stripe. Not some screenshot I made up, not an inspect element page that a lot of people use. A verified dashboard from Stripe. And what's awesome is I can see my revenue 7 days, 30 days, 90 days, all time. I have a beautiful monthly revenue chart, and I can also share this with others. So I click on share revenue, and then this URL is generated. I can then click the clipboard icon to copy it. And if I go to this URL, I essentially see the same thing. This is a URL that can be shared with everyone. And what's cool is I did this thing. So I just tweeted out the URL, and what's awesome about it is the open graph image that's generated, the social media preview that's generated is dynamic. So you see the data here, total revenue 27,463. It's the same exact thing here. So this is a project, super cool, super simple. Literally took me like an hour or two to build this, and my workflow was pretty simple. I used V0 to generate the hero section, and then honestly, I didn't know much about Stripe's API, so I used Claude to answer my questions. Moved super fast, super simple, but that's not what you're here for. You're here for the code. And I just want to let you know this repo is open source, so link is in the description. Make sure to hit a star, but let's get into the code. So it all starts with this page.tsx. In the app folder, I have a hero component and a floating badge component. And the floating badge is basically this right here. Let me go back to the home page. You see this nice little badge over here that says this was built using the Nextjs starter kit, which is my starter kit, which you can use to build. So if we go to the hero component, we see that there's some JSX, and there's the API form. And the API form, just to show you again, is this form right here, is this input and this button right here. And this is pretty simple. I have an on submit, right? I have a form, some JSX right here. I'm using React hook form for the form. I don't use server actions, to be honest, like the way Next recommends it. I really like React hook form, so I continue to use that. And I basically just get the API key, and then I pass it to my onSubmit. Now, in my onSubmit, there's a couple things I do. I call this API I have called API/verify. And API/verify is where all the information is pulled from. So basically, go through Stripe, and I get that information from Stripe. Stripe has a nice API that you can use to get this sort of information. And again, you can look at this code in more detail in the description down below. But basically, I get the sales for 7 days, 30 days, 90 days, and I get the chart data. And I also check that an API key is passed. If it's not passed, then obviously you get this error. Now, one thing I want you to realize is I don't store the API key. Once that call is made, the only thing I store is the information, right? The sales data and the chart data. And the way I do this is quite interesting. I get all that information and I store it in the cookies, right? Because this application has no auth. Up until this very point, no database is being used, right? And I don't want to store your API key, even though it's a read-only restricted access API key. I don't want to store your API key. So I store the information in the cookie. So you got 7 days, 30 days, 90 days, all day, chart data, and revenue growth, right? I store these in the cookies, and then I force you, or I route you to /dashboard. So if I were to go through this again, I hit verify income, you're going to notice it directs me to the dashboard page. So that's what the router.push does. And then there's some error handling. So let's go to /dashboard. So we're going to go to app /dashboard. Let's go to page TSX. So there's a few things happening here. There is, I have some skeletons loading, and then I have error handling. And I also make sure that anyone who's on the dashboard page actually has some data. If you don't have any data, you should go back to the home page. That's what this does. And then I have a share revenue component, sales card component, and revenue chart component. And basically, this is share revenue. These are the sales card. And then I believe this is called revenue chart. Yeah, and this is revenue chart. And literally all I do is I have this function called fetch sales data that pulls from the cookies, again, because I store this information in the cookies. I, set state, and then I pass this information into its respective components, right? And for the charts, before anyone asks, I am using Shad CNUI's charts, which has been a breeze and which is a beauty. Now, here's where things get interesting. Because the information is stored on your cookies, technically, if I do like a hard refresh or I remove my cookies, it all disappears. So let's say someone wants to share these stats with you. They click on share revenue, and then a URL is generated. And then if I copy it and I go to this URL, you're going to see the same stats, but I want you to notice something. It is /dashboard/some ID. And this is how it works. When someone clicks on, let me go back to dashboard, and let me go to share revenue. When someone clicks on share revenue, what happens is this server action is fired, store revenue. This is where I use a database. So if we go to store revenue, essentially what happens is I am storing this data into a database, and I am assigning a URL to a random UUID. So UUID is going to be generated. And essentially what's going to happen is once this is stored in the DB and I get the results, I set the URL to state, which becomes share URL. And then share URL is available for the person to copy, right? So if we go home, when I click share revenue, this is the URL that's generated. And what's cool is, again, I'm not doing any auth or anything like that. And the only information that's stored is the data, like the sales data, the revenue data, and the ID, the UUID, to make sure to match these things. So if someone wants to share this on Twitter and be like, hey, listen, guys, I am not a fake guru. Please believe me. They can hit tweet. And then if we open a tweet, let me hit refresh. You can see the stats right there. Super easy, super simple. And last but not least, in order to get let me go to dashboard ID. So in order to get the dynamic open graph image, that will be found in ID, because this is where the shareable URL information is. This is where like if I share with you the URL, this is what's rendering. And essentially what happens is I have, again, another function. This isn't a server action because this fetches on the server component. It's just a simple function, and I basically just pull from the Supabase database and I just check for that URL, that ID, and I pass that information in. That's why it looks the exact same. But this is where the dynamic open graph image is generated. I use the generate metadata function provided by Next.js, and I call this API/API/OG, and then I have a query param of ID where I pass the UUID. So if we go to API/OG, like, I'm not gonna lie, I used a lot of AI for this, right? Because this can get a little dense. It's not hard, but it just can get dense. But basically, I get the ID, I fetch the data, and then I show the data using inline styles and HTML the way I want it to show, specify the width and height, and then I would return new image response. And then what I do is I basically, in the generate metadata function, I pass new URL, and then I get the base domain, so whatever the website URL is, /API/OG, pass the ID, and then return this. And that is why I have this dynamic social media preview. I think that's what they're called. But ladies and gents, that's pretty much it. This is a quick project overview. Again, the code will be in the description down below. Make sure to check it out. Give it a star. One thing I will add before I leave, one kind of change I've been making is I really enjoy having a components folder in the app directory specific to a folder versus having a general components folder. For example, in dashboard, like a bar chart, I only use it on the dashboard. So instead of having bar chart in components, I have bar chart under underscore components. Just a small change I've been making in the last couple of weeks when writing some code. But that's pretty much it. Let me know if you enjoyed this video. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell. I appreciate you as always, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.